Good morning, beautiful people. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day today. I really enjoy watching Radaustin 27 and JohnyJ 25's content. I think that they are objective in their opinions. Granted, they still have their opinions, of course, but they are very thoughtful with what they think, and they articulate it very well. As I'm getting back into the Zombies game mode, I was catching up with all of the Zombroz podcasts the other day, and in their Tortured Path retrospective, link in the description, they began to discuss their thoughts on Dead of the Night. Now, I remember enjoying Dead of the Night quite a bit. I remember making a video discussing how it might have been one of the strongest Black Ops 4 zombie maps at the time. Of course, it has its flaws too, but generally speaking, I remember Dead of the Night being really well received. So upon listening to the Zombroz episode, Reed and John discussed their very intense negative feelings about the map. It made me rethink my thoughts on Dead of the Night and take a critical look at how it's designed. Of course, I went back and played it in full, and after a fresh playthrough and a more analytical lens, I think I'm ready to defend Dead of the Night. The main criticism the Zombroz had with Dead of the Night was the sheer number of spawn locations for each and every part of each and every buildable / Easter egg on the map. I know the title of the video is In Defense of Dead of the Night, but I have to agree with the Zombroz here. While taking a look at Dead of the Night with a critical eye, I came to the same conclusion. There are too many part locations to memorize on this map. Looking back on my first impressions video, link in the icon above, that criticism was also very true at the time of making that video. So if I agree with them, why defend Dead of the Night? Well, I agree with them that there are too many locations for each and every part piece, but what I disagree with is their logic and reasoning behind why having so many random possible locations is a bad thing. One of the first points the Zombroz bring up about these part locations is the fact that they believe in order to be successful on Dead of the Night, you are more or less required to craft at least silver bullets, and to a lesser extent, Alistair's Annihilator and the Savage Impaler. Whether or not that is true will depend on the player's skill level and willingness to overcome challenges. However, I will say that having at least silver bullets is going to make the map significantly easier and more enjoyable. I know this is a fine line that the more modern Zombies maps try to walk, making fun new additions without requiring them for casual play. And Dead of the Night really does come very close, and perhaps it even does cross that line into requiring these traditionally side quest items. While that sounds bad, and I have yet to actually defend Dead of the Night this far into the video, I don't think requiring these items is necessarily the reason having so many part locations is a bad thing. Rather, I think the frustration of being required is a result of the true negative behind having so many randomized locations. Perhaps the biggest point that the Zombroz mention is memorability. They mentioned that it can be difficult to memorize the sheer number of random locations required for getting each and every piece and part. Shadows of Evil was used as the comparison here. Shadows of Evil is incredibly complex and difficult to get set up on if you don't know each and every minor step. Much like how in Dead of the Night, getting set up can be just as complex and difficult if you don't know where each and every part location is. The difference here they brought up was the fact that in Shadows of Evil, the complexity was consistent. The fountain pen was in the exact same location every time. All of the pieces necessary for Pack-a-Punch were in the same piece every single match. The defense that I had to this point was simple. I can memorize all of the part locations in Dead of the Night just as easily as I can memorize everything to do in Shadows of Evil. This is a defense that even Smart Guy alluded to in the live chat during the podcast discussion. It only took a few matches and a few times looking up a guide in order to memorize the locations of these buildables and quest items. To add on top of this with a more objective take on this, I will bring up the concept of the video game rule of 3. The developers at Treyarch are incredibly smart in their level design. For the most part, they follow a simple rule when it comes to buildables and items. Generally speaking, there will only be one buildable in any given section of their level. For example, on Classified, there is only one shield piece and only one Pack-a-Punch telepad location on each of the 3 levels of Classified. Therefore, if you are a new player and pay attention to where you picked up those items, you can use your critical thinking skills to determine which level still has a piece you need to pick up. In comparison, in Dead of the Night, every item is split up evenly throughout the map. For example, the ingredients needed to make silver bullets can be found on the outermost ends of the map, as well as the main mansion. The shield pieces are found in the main spawn area and the 2 ground level side rooms. Even though it breaks the traditional rule of 3, the 4 symbol locations are found in the 4 different main sections of the map entirely: the right side, the left side, the mansion area, and the forest area. Being able to compartmentalize each of these pieces is actually really good game design on Treyarch's part. If you're missing an item, simply remember where you found the first 2, and you can generally figure out where you need to begin looking for the final part. Using this philosophy makes it much easier to actually memorize the part locations for each of these buildables. The next argument I want to talk about is the "I need to look up a guide just to get this" argument. While I argue that it is intuitive to figure out what area of the map a piece is located in, I wholeheartedly agree that you will probably need to look up a guide on where all of these pieces are specifically located. Luckily, you can check out Zombies 101 for all of your part location needs, link in the description or the icon above.
Hey, it's wonderful Wonderfizz!
In all seriousness, this is pretty flawed logic, and I'll give you an example. Origins. How in the world would anybody be able to upgrade any staff without first looking at a guide? What in-game clues does the map give you in order to upgrade any staff? How would any casual player be able to figure out to shoot these 3 tombstones with their ice staff and then again with a bullet weapon? There are literally thousands of different combinations of the Crazy Place trials for the Wind Staff, Ice Staff, and Lightning Staff. But we don't even need to talk about upgrading the staff, because how would a casual ever be able to figure out how to build the basic Fire Staff? Sure, the Panzer piece, the Generator 6 piece are all very intuitive, but then you have to look at the skybox for a glowing plane and then shoot it down in order to get the final piece. When has Zombies ever made you look at the skybox for a wonder weapon? If the players didn't have the internet, didn't have guides, and were stuck to their own devices, they would not be able to figure out most of the things on a lot of these Zombies maps. Even now, when upgrading the staffs, many players need a key in order to remember what position the knobs need to be for the Lightning Staff, or what numbers the symbols represent for the Fire Staff, or what symbols were supposed to match for the Wind Staff and Ice Staff. And it's not just Origins either. As previously mentioned, Shadows of Evil is incredibly complex and takes so much time and effort to even get Pack-a-Punch set up. And then there's Mob of the Dead, which gives you a whole different mode of play where you have to go through walls in the Afterlife mode and use efficient routes so you don't down yourself in order to just get Pack-a-Punch. And yet you don't quite hear the "I have to look up a guide" argument in regards to those maps. This is something the Zombies community has had to deal with for ages. I would argue that the popularity of Zombies, at least in part, came from people looking up guides on YouTube. I mean, the maps I just listed, Origins, Shadows of Evil, Mob of the Dead, are highly praised and constantly regarded as some of the best Zombies maps ever created. So the whole "I need to look up a guide" is flawed logic. While there is some validity to this statement for the Zombies game mode overall, that is a different topic for a different day. Alright, so why is having so many part locations a bad thing? If it's not because it's difficult to memorize, if it's not because I need to look up a guide, why is it such a negative thing? Well, I believe that having randomized part locations is simply not engaging. There is nothing mentally stimulating about searching for parts, even if you know where to look. Even if you've memorized it, it simply isn't exciting or mentally engaging. Now, some people can take this as being memorable because, generally speaking, if something is more engaging, it is usually more memorable. But I would argue the staffs in Origins, the power and pack-a-punch in Shadows of Evil and Mob of the Dead are more memorable because of how engaging they are. It is easier to remember to look up at the plane in Origins because of the mental engagement that occurred when you learned how to do it. When you find a piece of the shield or silver bullet, it isn't all that engaging or exciting at all. I believe that if getting silver bullets was more engaging, people would not feel as negatively about them. Even if they were necessary for the player's success of the map, if they were more fun, less tedious, and more engaging, the negative outcry wouldn't exist to this extreme. Now that we've figured out the true downside to randomized part locations, we need to talk about the next item the Zombroz had to discuss with Dead of the Night: Pack-a-Punch. As the Zombroz were discussing their distaste for the Pack-a-Punch process on Dead of the Night, I was similarly surprised, as I remember the Pack-a-Punch process being quite enjoyable and actually really engaging. I really enjoyed following the ghost to a specific location. I enjoyed defending myself inside a clock, and I really enjoyed fighting a small wave of vampires in an atmospheric area of the map. There are two aspects of the Pack-a-Punch quest that the Zombroz dislike: the randomized crystal locations and the randomized painting/clock locations. Let's start with the paintings as well as the clocks. Once you envision a clock or a painting for the Pack-a-Punch step, players might not be able to find the exact painting or exact clock shown in the vision. My defense is a reiteration of Treyarch's great level design. All of the painting locations are within the spawn rooms, so there is a very limited area that the players are going to be searching. That's what I would say if paintings were the only thing you could see in that vision. Unfortunately, there are 3 separate items you can envision during this specific quest: a scroll, a doll, and a noose, each of which is in a different area than the paintings, which, in my opinion, is bad level design. If they were to remove these items, this step would be much more palatable and fair. As far as the clocks are concerned, there are only 3 of them, and I believe they're the only 3 clocks in the entirety of the map, and unlike the randomized part locations, both the paintings and more so the clock locations are actually engaging due to the quest activity aspect of them. Yes, you are going to kill zombies in a circle with every clock, but killing them in the billiards room is going to be a different experience than killing them in the dining room. That creates an engaging and therefore more memorable experience. Same goes for the ghost with paintings and items. Every painting gives the player a unique dialogue with the ghost and a different part of the narrative, which engages the player more than just it being a random location for a part or item. And finally, we need to talk about the crystal that has 3 different random spawn locations, and then acts as a soul box. This is simple. I truly don't understand why the crystal has 3 spawn locations. It's redundant. Most of the time, the different locations are mere feet away from each other. I don't see the gameplay variety added by making these crystals move each and every match. And then they act as soul boxes for some reason, but you only need like 3 zombies to fill it up, and at that point, why not just have it be ready for activation right away? All you're doing is making the player melee a jar within a 100 square foot area and then kill 3 zombies in that area. What purpose does that serve? How is that fun? It's odd. It's not bad. It's not something that detracts anything significant from the experience, but it certainly doesn't add anything. If those crystals just appeared on the tables and you looked at the vision inside of those crystals and got straight to the actually engaging part of the Pack-a-Punch process, it would be much smoother and much more enjoyable. Because I really enjoy the Pack-a-Punch process in Dead of the Night. I think it's very interesting to hear the story of this ghost. I think it's fun to kill zombies within the clock, and it's pretty fast-paced and heart-pounding at times to survive that first round of vampires. why bog down that amazingly replayable and entertaining experience with weird decisions like moving a crystal 10 feet every game and making the player kill 3 zombies nearby? It's just weird. That being said, I think the Pack-a-Punch quest is actually pretty intuitive. I believe I was able to Pack-a-Punch without a guide, on my own, without any help on my first attempt. I wouldn't doubt that that would be possible for a casual, because the crystals glow, the vision is pretty self-explanatory, and the challenges aren't too difficult to complete either. So overall, I really enjoy the Pack-a-Punch process, yet I understand that there are certain weird aspects to it. There is one more aspect of Dead of the Night that I would like to add to this discussion, and it has to do with the very first point that the Zombroz brought up: the necessity of silver bullets and the shield. They argued that those buildables are more of a necessity to survive and be successful than most other zombie maps due to how overwhelming the vampires are. As I stated previously, if silver bullets and the shield were more engaging to get, it would be less of an issue. However, there is another solution. Nerf the danger of vampires so that the shield and silver bullets don't feel like a necessary aspect to the map. Vampires and werewolves have been nerfed since the release of Dead of the Night and are significantly more enjoyable and reasonable to take down. Adding in silver bullets does feel like a bonus rather than a necessity, but I think Treyarch could have done more. Vampires are incredibly aggressive. They are fast, strong, deal damage, and prevent the player from regenerating health. Not to mention they can leap from such a long distance. Unlike other boss zombies that might be slower with more damaging attacks or faster and easier to take out, vampires are fast, strong, and pose a serious threat. This is why I believe they could use one more balancing factor. The first thing that I think should happen is an alteration of how the vampires attack the player. I think I learned this from a Rizzo video, but the vampire's leaping attack is actually an area of effect attack, which means that even if you see a vampire begin to leap at you and you dodge out of the way and the vampire seemingly lunges past you and is facing away from you, if you are close enough, it will deal a hit of damage and prevent your health from regenerating. This is simply unfair and unbalanced and really needs to be changed. There is very little room to actually dodge vampires consistently, which is a problem for how fast they are. Of course, as I alluded to earlier, vampires don't have a weakness. They are fast, they are strong, they attack from a large radius as well as prevent health regeneration. There needs to be some sort of balancing factor here. Either make them slower, make them weaker and die quicker, or make them deal significantly less damage. If these changes were implemented, it would significantly alleviate the overwhelming feeling you get from vampires, which would, in turn, make the shield and silver bullets feel like a luxury rather than a necessity. There are many aspects to Dead of the Night that I absolutely love. Going back and playing it again was a blast. There are so many side quests and hidden Easter eggs. The Wonder Weapon is one of my favorite Wonder Weapons of all time, and the atmosphere is immersive. The map layout flows wonderfully, and I actually do love the Pack-a-Punch setup and boss zombies. Yes, there are too many random part locations. There are some weird steps for things, and the boss zombies could be tweaked a little bit. But the positives of Dead of the Night certainly outweigh its negatives. If you've seen this Zombroz podcast, I hope I was able to entertain you with a further discussion and maybe give you an intriguing look at how I view zombies. And if Reed or John are watching this, well, first, that'd be pretty cool. But also, I hope I was able to add to your already thoughtful discussion and give an interesting perspective on Dead of the Night. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe for more zombies content. Until the next absolutely beautiful zombies morning, I'll catch up with you guys later, and as always, stay beautiful.
I'll tell you something that is always alive.